And the other thing of importance there, in that chamber of the prayers of flood, that's where he was told the conditions for the flood are present long before the water. So thinking of that in psychological and therapeutic terms, it means that the flooding, if you think of that being overwhelmed with emotions, really get into a complex. What you do in therapy is if you're working psychodynamically, you're looking to see what experiences earlier in life set you up to be put into a complex by certain recurring experiences in relationships. And add one more thing to remember, that each chamber had particular types of music associated with it. The next night's dream, he dreamt of the necessity to, quote, organize the jumble of Miles Davis CDs, especially the Dark Magus, which I have been listening to repeatedly. I'm aware of music as a map of emotions and see it as a parallel to the banking and intensification of the fire under the pot on bear and pig stove. During a dream stage, I enter the chamber of the prayer of wings. The woman there reminds me that there are wings of all sizes, from the tiny insects to the wings of eagles. She also reminds me that this is the chamber of wings, not of flight. What I am doing now is preparing, working with the inner energies before turning to the outside world. She will cast a hexagram with me as part of the process. The banking of the fire is like the banking of wings on the wind. The intensification like the beating of wings when that's what is needed. And all of these are tied in with the feeling emotion without naming it or letting it have control. The hexagram which I cast was 33, retreat or withdrawal, heaven above, mountain below. So the message from the powerful dreams and music is to regulate the fire, know when to increase the intensity of the alchemical process and when to lower it. And you might also add that you need the wings to fly. And this is not about flight itself, but what you need to be able to fly. So we can see how the hexagram maps onto the message of the prayer of wings. Hexagram 33, retreat or withdrawal, with no changing lines, looks like this. The upper trigram is the creative heaven, and the lower trigram is keeping still, the mountain. Commentary is how heaven can rise above an approaching inferior element, depicted as a mountain rising to the heavens. That's the inferior element. The superior man, this is from Wilhelm, shows strength, heaven, in that he brings the inferior man to a standstill, mountain, by his dignified reserve, end of quote. He does not hate him, for hatred is a form of subjective involvement by which we are bound to the hated object. We could interpret this as Dave in relation to his overpowering emotion in dealing with negative feminine energies in a university situation he was currently dealing with at the time. So the Richard Wilhelm translation goes on to say, quote, we must be careful not to miss the right moment to retreat while we are in full possession of power and position, while retreating for a counter movement. In further discussion, Dave said that his sense of the agate and the slice in time is that life is a flow and we are to focus on only one slice or moment in time. Not to be in the flow is to be captured by desires, looking to the future, or held back by in the past by traumas, for example. At difficult moments in his past, he would be too harsh with himself, which was over-determining the moment. His goal now was to be in the moment for whatever it was. In the intensive listening he was doing at the time to the Miles Davis CDs, he was focusing on the here and now, noting that when one musician reaches a stuck point, the other musicians start to play. He learns not to focus on an emotion, but put into a broader supportive context as they do in jazz, where they develop a theme as they play off each other. He compared that to Tai Chi, where one does not tackle something directly, and to the hexagram retreat. One of my favorite commentaries in Wilhelm I Ching is hexagram 16, Enthusiasm. Under the image, it says, quote, when at the beginning of summer thunder, electrical energy, and here we can think of how lightning was associated with the West in his dreams. I just made that connection. Electrical energy comes rushing forth from the earth again, and the first thunderstorm refreshes nature. A prolonged sense of tension is resolved. Joy and relief make themselves felt. So too, music has power to ease tension within the heart and to loosen the grip of obscure emotions. The enthusiasm of the heart expresses itself involuntarily in a burst of song and dance and rhythmic movement of the body. From immemorable times, the inspiring effect of the invisible sound that moves all hearts and draws them together has mystified mankind. So 8 weeks after entering the first of the 7 chambers, he dreams of entering the final chamber, the chamber of the prayer of flight. Quote, my guide tells me to remember what I have learned, and it's not about the women associated with the top line of the well hexagram. Inside the chamber, there is a table on which sits the alchemical vessel containing the cactus, the black rock, the desert with the tower, and the temple of Asclepius. I am aware of them as a sequence, the map of my psychic development. The stone, which has been on the skull, in the skull on the desk of St. Jerome, is on the table, and Our Lady of Tears in her hippie chick guise is touching it. She is engaging the second of the hexagrams retreat. Soon it will be time to move to the third niche and the realm of initiation. This is followed by 6 nights of difficult dreams before dreaming, quote, I'm walking slowly down the path from the second to the third niche. I have no guide and I'm having trouble focusing my attention. I'm aware I should cast a hexagram to proceed over my work with the realm of intuition. End of dream. So Dave awakes and he casts hexagram 53, development, gradual progress, with the top line changing, which yields hexagram 39, obstruction. This will be the third hexagram to be engraved on the stone. Hexagram 53, development gradual process, has a trigram, the gentle, the wind, the wood on top. On top of the hexagram associated with keeping still the mountain. Wood on the mountain elicits this commentary from Wilhelm. Quote, a tree on a mountain develops slowly according to laws of its being and consequently stands firmly rooted. This gives the idea of a development that proceeds gradually, step by step. The attributes of the trigram also point to this. Within is tranquility, which guards against precipitous actions, and without is penetration, which makes development and progress possible, end of quote. Further commentary is that, quote, gentleness that is adaptable, but at the same time penetrating, is the outer form that should proceed from inner calm. So a further comment by Wilhelm is, quote, no sudden influence or awakening is of lasting effect. To influence others, it is necessary for the personality to acquire influence and weight. This comes about through careful and constant work on one's own moral development, end of quote. Carol Anthony, the third translation I always consult, has this comment on the top line. On seeing people who have wronged us in the past, we should keep strict discipline to maintain our inner independence. We neither dwell on what has happened nor erect defenses. We maintain caution and reserve. In this way, we avoid dangerous presumptions and remain free to respond to any real changes that have occurred, end of quote. So I take the structural approach. to interpreting hexagram 15 or 53 in relation to hexagram 39. So, namely, in the structural approach, you look at the section hexagram as a deeper level of the first hexagram. In obstruction, the trigram, the abysmal water, is above keeping still the mountain. Wilhelm says, quote, the hexagram represents obstructions that appear in the course of time that can and must be overcome. He continues, one must join forces with friends of like mind and put oneself under the leadership of a man equal to the situation. End of quote. This could be interpreted as the importance of being in therapy. Quote from Wilhelm, this requires the will to persevere just when one apparently must do something that leads away from the goal. This unswerving inner purpose brings good fortune at the end. An obstruction that lasts only for a time is useful for self-development. This is the value of adversity, end of quote. So Vivi add that, think of how important it is to receive advice like this from the archetypal domain to give you encouragement to keep on with your very difficult work. So just 4 months later, Dave used the images, processes, and advice from the I Ching to deal with deep, emotionally difficult material going back to his grandparents. He was able to distance himself from an emotionally charged relationship related to the top line of the well, the hexagram, the well. As his sabbatical ended in September, 13 months after he began analysis, he dreams of turning to Our Lady of Tears in the second part of a dream where she is sitting across from him at a table. They cast a hexagram with coins, and he remembers the lines emerging one by one to produce hexagram 30, fire, with changing lines in the second and fifth place from the bottom. Quote, Our Lady of Tears, now looking like the hippie chick, reaches under a cloth where the stone rests and engraves the hexagrams with her fingers. Fire on top, heaven on the underside. She then lifts the stone and turns to a shadowy man who is holding a red glass towards her and squeezes a small amount of thick, dark liquid into the glass. It is the umber. The man hands the glass to me, but it falls to the ground. There is a crevice at my feet, and the glass falls into it. It will descend deep into the earth, into the areas that lie beneath the mantle. End of dream. So Vivi add that to remember that in this round of analysis, his third round, he really wanted to deal with personal issues with the feminine in his life and also with archetypal feminine energies. So this is an amazing result for a final set of hexagrams. Hexagram 30, the clinging fire, is a doubling of hexagram Li with a yin line between two yang lines. This transforms into hexagram 1, the creative heaven. The trigram, the creative heaven, is related to the archetypal masculine, expansive, firm, light, giving power. And it has incorporated the central element of the receptive earth, hexagram 2, the archetypal feminine, the dark and containing in its core, its center, the central line of the trigram Li. This is what gives the creative its brightness. The dark eye has been incorporated into the yang of the yin-yang symbol. And as someone with a Wisconsin dairy farmer background, I love the statement under the judgment in Wilhelm. It says, care of the cow brings good fortune. The explanation of the judgment is, quote, what is dark clings to what is light, and so enhances the brightness of the latter. A luminous thing gives out light, must have something itself within that perseveres. Otherwise, it will in time burn itself out. End of quote from Wilhelm. Further commentary from Wilhelm is, human life on earth is conditioned and unfree. And when man recognizes this limitation and makes himself dependent upon the harmonious and beneficent forces of the cosmos, he achieves success. The cow is the symbol of extreme docility. By cultivating in himself an attitude of compliant and voluntary dependence, man acquires clarity without sharpness and finds his place in the world. End of quote. The cow symbolizes how one is to relate to the self in Jungian terms and how Lao Tzu described the relationship to the Tao. So Dave's journey with Our Lady of Tears was framed by the hexagram of the well, with the lines representing the difficult personal relationships with women friends and his wives. At a broader level, it also dealt with intergenerational trauma, that bit about his grandparents. The final hexagram states that this relationship with the internal feminine, a wisdom anima, will give him clarity without sharpness, if he tends to her well like a dairy farmer tends to his or her cows. In the commentary on the changing line, the old yin in the second place, emphasis is on the midday sun shining with yellow light. Wilhelm says, yellow is the color of the measure and the mean. Yellow light is therefore a symbol of the highest culture and art, whose consummate harmony consists in holding to the mean. End of quote. Recall that a major effort in Dave's analysis, as portrayed by dreams, hexagrams, and music, was to find a more objective, measured relationship to the eros wounds in his soul, not to be overwhelmed by them. So R.L. Wing translation says of the old yang in the fifth place, quote, a true change of heart is occurring. Such a dramatic change is sometimes accompanied by deep grief. Yet with this grief comes good fortune, because the change will bring better times for all concerned. End of quote. Hexagram 1, the creative, that's what the other hexagram turned into, is composed of all yang lines. One of the most powerful hexagrams, complemented by hexagram 2, the receptive, composed of all yin lines. Hexagram 1 is about creative potential and the power to move from potential to full form, each form realizing the full potential according to its innate nature. It is expansive, firm, light-bringing power. It sees with great clarity the causes and effects, apprehending and giving actuality to the way of the universe, the Tao, which brings all phenomena into being. It perseveres in molding developing forms and keeps them in conformity with the great harmony. It brings peace and security through its activity of creating order. It is the wisdom that discerns the immutable laws of all that happens and can therefore bring about enduring conditions. So we had two thoughts about the meaning of the umber Our Lady squeezed from the stone, that thick, dark liquid that's squeezed into the glass and that fell into a crevice and descended below the earth's mantle. It might be one of the 4 suggestions about what to do with the stone associated with attaching the angel's wings. Leave it in silence by making a small fleck with a knife on the surface of the black-red part of Monet's water lily canvas and sinking it beneath the water. Dave's association was that geology ultimately affects topography over eons and eons of time. One can think of the umber as having a deep and lasting effect on the many layers of the collective unconscious. When I did my Jungian eco-psychology workshop in Calgary, Canada, a retired geologist said that he used to think of the layers and strata of the earth as geological history. He attained a profoundly different level for the land when he thought of it as the layers of the, quote, the earth's memory, unquote. So another thought is that the elixir returns to the source, to what the Tao points to, what Lao Tzu called the dark enigma, out of which existence and non-existence, word and image emerges. So Vivi, you might add that to remember that painting that was referred to earlier of the death and resurrection of Jesus, where Jesus was that small figure, and on the inhale, he held a ball that was the Tao, and then when he exhaled, the Tao surrounded him. And the goal there ultimately was to be Jesus up in heaven. But the end result of these series of dreams and these hexagrams is a return to the source, which I associated with Lao Tzu's dark enigma. And you might add as well to remember that one of the things that was happening in this round of analysis was he was starting to move away from a deep immersion in Christianity back to a Taoism that he had been interested in earlier in his life. And also that another association Lao Tzu had with the Tao was the mother. So by way of review, here is the diagram of the 4 cages in St. Jerome's Terrace in the west. The hexagram in the north should really be between the south and the east, because it provided guidance after he left the tower in the realm of emotion and moved toward intuition associated with the east. So here is the diagram summary of the whole 3rd round of analysis, going counterclockwise from the top, showing the relationship between compass directions, psychological types, significant dream images, and hexagrams. The skull on St. Jerome's desk could be put in the west, where it was first encountered, but what was in the skull was opened and dealt with in the emotional realm associated with the tower in the south. So this shows an amazing amount of structure in the psyche and a profound link between East and West via the I Ching. I told you this was going to be complex. Wilhelm's comment under the image in hexagram 26, The Taming of the Great, provides the perfect closure for this talk. Quote, "In the words and deeds of the past, there lies hidden a treasure that men may use to strengthen and elevate their own characters. The way to study the past is not to confine oneself to mere knowledge of history, but through application of this knowledge to give actuality to the past." End of quote. Dave's intensive work with his dreams, as guided and framed by the I Ching, is an example of giving actuality to the past. So Vivi, you might add this. I showed these, the PowerPoint and my text to Dave before I sent it off to you to be translated, and to check that everything was accurate. And he said it was, and he said, I was just engaged deeply. And he said, it's really fascinating to revisit this part of the progress. I think its impact has been long lasting. And I asked him, how it was that his dreams were so sequential and seemed almost organized. And he said that he focused on previous dreams before he would go to sleep when he was having those tower dreams. And he said it seemed to work particularly well with active imagination, on the borderline with consciousness, on the borderline between consciousness and being asleep. Summary. So this presentation illustrates how a sequence of dreams in the psychoanalytic process can be framed by hexagrams from the I Ching. 2 hexagrams spontaneously emerging in dreams convey guiding archetypal concepts and orientation for processes to be performed by the dreamer. 3, the dreams demonstrate the archetype of number as the purest ordering form in the psyche as in the cosmos. The dreams reveal a link between archetypal imagery in the Western psyche, example, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Nietzsche, and Prospero, and a core conceptual system in Chinese culture, the I Ching. The dream series illustrates how core Jungian psychoanalytic concepts and processes, like the containing of the alchemical vessel and working with emotions, the anima, active imagination, and use of meditative techniques, can be framed by concepts in the I Ching And sixth, the dreams and hexagrams presented are part of a gestalt together with imagery, neurophysiology, and music. So Vivi, you could add that this is the third time I have presented this, but it's the first time that I've had enough time to do a thorough presentation, and it's the first time that it has been translated into Chinese. Thank you.
谢谢。
Let's see what we can do with the time we have left for whatever questions people may have or comments.
So could you tell us about the change of the analysand in his reality after analysis?
Well, like I said, when I contacted him a month ago and showed him the material that I was presenting to make sure that I got it right, because there was a lot of detail here. He said, and I read before, he said, I think the impact has been long lasting. So it's still affecting him. And I might add that research now has shown that, you know, the dominant form of therapy in the United States, cognitive behavioral therapy, where you kind of try to eliminate symptoms, that if you compare that to the effects of relational therapy like Jungian psychology, if you look 3 years later, that there hasn't been that much change in the people who did cognitive, but there has been real change in the lives of people who did like Jungian type psychology, relational therapy, because they had learned how to draw upon their inner resources. I might add that by showing my analysands how to use the I Ching, I describe it as giving them a tool they can use the rest of their lives, especially when they learn how to connect it with their dreams and their life processes. So I'm just very pleased to give something back to China connected with you know, one of its central books of wisdom, and I'm just very pleased that I was able to give this presentation and that you were able to translate it.
So I want to confirm that the analysand, did the analysand use I Ching to work with his dreams, or he just used I Ching to give guidance to his active imagination?
Oh, he used both. And what I illustrated in this talk was that it was 2 or 3 times he was told to consult the Jing at important transitional points in the analysis. And then it was 2 or 3 times he was given a hexagram in the dream, and he told me he intuited what the changing lines were. But that last hexagram, he remembered the lines emerging as his anima figure, Our Lady of Tears, was casting a hexagram. But in the last hexagrams he got, it was Our Lady of Tears in his dreams that was casting the hexagram. So he was able to use thinking, but then the way I thought of sensation is that, particularly if you're an intuitive type, it's really hard to slow yourself down and deal with the details. And that what was happening in his dreams when one of the main images we were following was the agate with all those many layers. So being able to slow down and deal with one layer at a time and the details in that, I associate that with the sensation function and the West. And then when you think of it, when you're able to slow down enough to deal with the details, then he goes to the realm with the tower and the emotions and the feeling function. And so to be able to sink deeply into the feelings with the help of music, that was what was transformative. That was, and that associated with the anima, the deepest level of the anima, or he was guided through all those 7 layers by Our Lady of Tears, Our Lady of Tears. So to be able with in detail and with sensation to experience those emotions, that was healing. And then to go from that to his auxiliary function, intuition, he's bringing that, he had now incorporated, as we saw with those hexagrams, the feminine within the archetypal receptive within the feminine, and that added a brightness to it. So his auxiliary function was experienced in a deeper way, in a richer way.
Mm.
Well, I want to thank everybody for participating, and thank you especially, Vivi, for, I presume you did a good job translating. I didn't understand any of it, but again, I was very pleased to be able to present this, and I was really glad that it was recorded because, like I said, it was so complex, and I can't imagine anybody understanding all of these complexities with one go through. But because it's recorded, people will be able to come back to it if they want to.
Someone says that such an analysand needs us to have the brainstorm is a really sourcing to be his analyst. So we need to take time. There's also, we need to take time to digest such a case.
Yeah, it's an
And
awful
also they want to thank you for your profound analysis and sharing.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I've never had a case like this before, and as an analyst, you get a chance to, when you witness something like this, it's just an amazing experience to see what the human psyche can be. And particularly in this case with the hexagrams from the I Ching, it's like, my goodness, that whole realm beyond the ego, beyond what we understand in Western consciousness, is to see that affect an analysand and guide his life is, to me, just a wonderful thing to participate in. So again, I want to thank you and the Psy Heart for inviting me, and I hope this will help to bring some understanding and show the connection between China and the West, and particularly between China and the United States. So thank you again. We can be all be thankful for the wisdom from the I Ching.